Interrupt for a sec. Can I
Sure.
Well, I have to make one point here. I've never heard anybody speak so well of Clippy.
Well, yeah, I know exactly. This is why.
Hello and welcome to episode 146 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Christmas Eve, and if this is your tradition, happy holidays. I hope you've had a good week and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but on this weekly podcast, I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums that I've met on my 20-year journey from sysadmin to CMO, and share what we call marketing street knowledge. Come say hello. You can find me, all my guests, and the show notes at rockstarcmo.com or Rockstar CMO on the socials. We're also part of the Marketing Podcast Network, who this week reached 200,000 downloads for the year. Congrats to the team. Something different this week, Jeff is away, but I'm joined by two guests, Mark Demany and Noz Urbina, to discuss a hot topic from 2022, the Metaverse, following what I can only describe as a dare on LinkedIn. And we wind down for the holidays in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and see what's under his marketing Christmas tree. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back. After this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
The Metaverse has been a hot topic this year, and as you'll hear, this conversation was inspired by a post on LinkedIn by Noz Urbina. Noz is an omnichannel content solutions lead specializing in pharma and regulated industries, and is the founder of Urbina Consulting and the online omnichannel conference Omnichannel X. He's also an author, speaker, and podcaster. We are joined by Mark Demany, Head of Product Strategy at Uniform, who has had a fantastic career in web content management and digital experiences. From the early days of web development to most recently, he's led product strategy for Sitecore, Optimizely, and Contentful. Mark sparked a conversation in the comments of Noz's post, and which ended up with him basically daring me into having them on the show and sharing that conversation with you guys. And it was my absolute pleasure to catch up with them. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Mark, Noz, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing great.
Doing fantastic.
You can see already that I'm not used to talking to two people. I should have addressed that to one of you or the other one, right? So for people that don't know either of you, and I've done a little bio before we started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe, Noz, if you want to start.
Absolutely. So I am an omnichannel content strategist and designer. I am the founder of my consultancy company, Urbina Consulting. We're about to celebrate our 10th year next year.
Wow.
Very happy about that. And we focus on omnichannel. So we work with usually large organizations, a lot of pharmaceuticals, regulated industries, manufacturing, and so on, to help them unify. Companies, even with the deepest pockets, need to start getting more integrated, holistic strategies, which includes things like the Metaverse, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, it's a big topic, isn't it, omnichannel? And it's nice to have you on to talk about the Metaverse as well.
Oh, sorry, I can't not say I'm also founder of the Omnichannel X conference, which is happening, in May this year.
You have a lot of things going on, Noz.
I got a lot of plates
I feel
in
like
there.
I've known you forever, but this is, I think, the first time we've actually spoken, whereas we've kind of been in these same circles. And you're talking to us from Valencia in Spain, which is also quite wonderful. So thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Mark, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I have been in content management and digital experience for about 18 years, both on the client side and recently a lot on the vendor side. And my current role is head of product strategy for a company called Uniform. And very similar industry. We're in composable architectures and omnichannel, and where Noz is sort of on the consulting side of omnichannel, Uniform as a company really provides a product to help actually enable that really on the individual side.
Cool. Yeah, and you're in Canada, right?
I am just north of Ottawa, Canada. Yep.
Nice, very nice. And somebody where it's probably colder than it is here at the moment because I'm in the UK. So
I understand we both have snow though, which is we're good with it. But you're shut down, I've heard.
We do, and as anybody who listens to the show knows, we're obsessed with the weather. So I'm always mentioning the weather. Anyway, so you, Mark, actually threw the podcast gauntlet down on this one. You're the one who started the trouble here. So just for some background for the listener, Noz, you mentioned a Guardian article on LinkedIn about Meta's investment in the Metaverse. Mm-hmm. And in that LinkedIn conversation, Mark, you basically dared me to say, let's have this conversation on the podcast, because there was a bit of a difference of opinion in that LinkedIn conversation. So thank you very much for joining and for coming on this. So we're going to do this Metaverse special. But I think, shall we start off with the basics rather, which is what's your definition of the metaverse? So Noz, I think you were nominated to kick off this part of the conversation. So what's your definition of the metaverse?
Well, it'd be my pleasure. So my definition of the metaverse is the immersive 3D internet. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go through this in much greater detail later, but basically it's where the internet stops being something that is displayed just on surfaces or in two-dimensional content, but something that really takes advantage of three-dimensional and spatial-aware content. So there's lots of different things we're seeing that are going in that direction and converging on this requirement to break free of two dimensions. And what the metaverse is, it's instead of something that you look at, it's something that you can be inside. So content that you can walk into, content that you can explore physically, that you can see all around you, and that opens up all sorts of design concepts, which I'm sure we'll get to in the length and breadth of the conversation. But it's a new way of interacting with content, and it has lots of implications on an organization's content supply chain, ideation, and digital asset management, all content modeling, all these good things that we talk about in omnichannel projects. So that would be my very high level definition. I'm interested to see what color Mark adds to that.
And also, I mean, it's highly tied to Web3 at the moment, isn't it? So are you alongside that it's a core tenet of Web3 when anybody talks about that too?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think that Web3 is essential. Metaverse, I think that you can talk about the metaverse, Web3 as the combination of the metaverse, blockchain technologies, and a few other different kind of infrastructure things that all make Web3 happen. But the metaverse bit of it is this idea of this three-dimensional content space that's somewhere that's we can be part of, both the real world and the digital worlds coming together.
Yeah, and before we get to the disagreements that I think, Mark, you've hinted at in our LinkedIn conversation, would you agree with Noz's definition there, or have you got a different take?
I agree, and there's some nuances to it, though. I think one of the real issues that all of us have when we're discussing the metaverse is that the definitions are really variable depending upon whether it's a specific vendor definition that's being put forth by Meta, or whether it does, to your point, Ian, include things like Web3, which then includes things like blockchains and NFTs, and you'd mentioned potentially digital assets transferable across different company metaverses, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really hard to pin down what it is, and I think for the context of the conversation, and at least when we were thinking about it in the context of the original Guardian article, it was is Meta / Facebook's bet and their version of the metaverse, is that one going to pay off, or two interesting and of value to marketers, and I think I was questioning that aspect of it in particular.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. So on this topic of what is the metaverse? Do you feel like it's, I mean, I've heard it described as it's like the internet in 95 or 98 or 97, whichever one you want to, 1990, however far you want to go back. Is that where we are, do you think, in terms of the metaverse? I mean, Mark, what do you think?
I think it is in terms of its infancy. I think the primary difference, though, is you look at the internet in the mid 90s, it was very sort of lefty or libertarian, or carving out all these different spaces for different individual communities. And I think the difference is today, it's from the get-go extremely monetized. You know, Facebook is looking at this as you need to have a Facebook account, you need to have a Facebook headset. You know, anybody looking at it from the point of view of NFTs, it's like, oh, you can micro content or micro transaction the digital assets that you own and, you know, collect X on that. And so the current context, I think, is very driven by money rather than culture, which I think is the big difference between the early days.
And Noz, I can see you nodding, but isn't that similar to AOL back in the day? I know that you guys are probably just a little bit younger than me, but isn't that the same as what AOL tried to do, create this walled garden? Isn't that the same as what Meta are trying to do?
And isn't it really what Facebook's doing now, and Facebook always has done? So, you know, I don't disagree that there's an attempt to create these walled gardens. I kind of shrug them off. So I do agree with your original premise. I've actually explicitly said that we are in the forgotten area of the metaverse. So when I've been presenting on it, I bring up the history of my smartphones. Yeah. So if you Google the history of smartphones, you get the first internet-enabled smartphone, which was 2001, and then the iPhone, 2007. So there's a better part of a decade. Very important decade in terms of internet and web technologies, just jumped over because no one cared what happened in those 7 years. And I think that's where we are with the metaverse, is that a lot of the details of the jockeying for position is all going to be forgotten. You know, Samsung coming out with their headset, Apple's coming out with their headset. Microsoft has just formed a major partnership with Facebook to kind of leverage their headset investment. Plus, they have their own headsets, which they're targeting at the non-consumer market. So everybody's going to try to bite off a bigger chunk because they saw what happened with the internet. As Mark was saying, when it first arose, it came out of academic circles, and it was, you know, it was just this kind of a hippie commune for words, and that businesses saw that happen, and then like, we're not letting that happen again. So they're all definitely going to try to get in there first. But no one, when this all comes out in the wash, no one can own the internet, so it's not going to. I
want to go to this hippie commune of words. I love that.
Yeah, well, it died 23 years ago.
Yeah.
But in the article that you highlighted, Noz, the Guardian article, the key controversy, and this seemed to be the key topic of discussion, because it wasn't just you two that commented on that thing either. There was a couple of other people that weighed in on the LinkedIn thing. Was a lot of the commentary was on how big Meta is betting on the metaverse, which I think is what you both just referred to there. And people are saying that he's a little bit blindsided, he's a bit single-minded on this, and he doesn't seem to care about Facebook, the rest of the company, that he's totally all in on the metaverse, and that's you know, it's the hill he's going to die on almost, you know. So Mark, what did you think of that? I mean, you had some thoughts on LinkedIn.
There's a couple different thoughts, and they're sort of competing. But there's my sort of literal thought, and there's my, you know, semi-conspiracy theory hat thought. And the literal thought is, you know, yes, he's definitely investing a lot in this. I think there's a lot of Silicon Valley leaders, for lack of a better word, that kind of lean back on science fiction and Neil Stephenson and William Gibson and all of those things, and think like, oh man, that's really cool. And, you know, they look at it as something that's, you know, one, cool, and two, inevitable, because they can sort of see it in their mind based off, you know, the works of fiction that were a generation ago. And so, you know, I think that, but I also think part of the interesting thing about the metaverse and Facebook's announcement was that it was very quick, and the timing around it was around a lot of other controversies that Facebook was having, and the launch of it for a company that was very media focused. And I'd be curious about your opinion as a CMO on this, Ian. It felt very amateurish, like literally it was a bunch of university kids cramming the night before and putting together this thing that's like, oh no, we're going to pivot to this thing, which was, it felt like a distraction of a lot of the serious issues that Facebook was facing around some of the other controversies that they were having. So I think it's a bit of, in my mind, those two things could both be true. But that's how it feels to me. There's one, it feels rushed, but two, it also feels like, okay, this is it now, and we are committing and, lashing themselves to the mast on it.
Yeah. And Nuz, what do you think?
So I don't disagree with any of that. The fact that the timing and the way it was done could have some strategy behind it, and so I always refer to the greatest and most transparent and cynical example of this is when George Bush changed daylight savings in the U.S.
Yeah.
You remember? Yeah. It's like he was in hot water, and it's like, all right, we're going to change daylight savings. And the entire news cycle, it suddenly became obsessed with this change of an hour. So that there could be a little bit of that going on. Like, don't look at the man behind the curtain. I have no problem with that. But what I'm also seeing from Zuckerberg is he's bringing the band back together. It's basically Facebook again, in the sense of he has a vision. He sees this as the future. And he's going to drive it home, and he's going to change the world with it. And I'm not going to say, like, with full respect to all the great people who work at Meta and all its sub companies. I probably still say Facebook without noticing. All these different kind of sub organizations. I don't have to be a fan of Zuckerberg himself or the way he conducts business just to say that he's banking on a strategy, which I do agree with long term. I would. So if we're talking about agree or disagree, the thing that jumped out to me about what you just said, Mark, was the science fiction thing, and I don't like. I'm a semi-closeted mega nerd, and I spent a lot of my time watching these technologies in their, not even in their infancy, in their pre-insemination stage. So for example, I was talking about the metaverse, augmented reality, and I was presenting on it a decade ago. And I was presenting on the fact, I was presenting a guy who was going to the supermarket with his augmented reality headset a decade before that. So like he had rigged up this backpack full of computing hardware and a camera and an eyepiece, and he would ask his wife, what do you think of the look of these watermelons? Through his augmented reality headset in like 91 or something. The late 90s. So I keep an eye on this stuff. And yes, those ultra mega nerds may be inspired by science fiction, but they break ground, and what I look at is not the particulars of how one company is doing it. What I look at is, are they solving a human need? Is there a requirement for this in the world? Are they on the right path? So I look back and go, look, Microsoft tried chatbots. We all forgot about that. Microsoft pioneered the hell out of chatbots, and they just did it too early and they did it badly, but it was the right thing to do. We call it Clippy now, and we make fun of it. But they tried to create an artificial intelligence chatbot that could answer questions, provide a human-like dialogue, guide people on their way in tasks. They were way too early, as we saw with Google Glass. Google could pull out an iPhone for the face. The technology wasn't there. Google couldn't make it happen. So I don't really care if somebody face plants on one of these attempts. What I'm talking about is that this is the way that the internet kind of has to go for many user and market driven reasons. And that's why I think that marketers and content people in general need to pay attention. Not because I agree with Zuckerberg's exact implementation or ideas of what he's going to do with Meta. I agree that he's right, that this is the way of the future. And jumping on something when it's gone mainstream and trying to pivot your company, I've seen that to be generally a losing strategy. I think we need to be looking at, okay, what are the baby steps? What are the incremental changes we can make now that get us all in the metaverse path so that we can keep ahead of this wave as it continues to build?
Yeah. There's going to be some violent agreement, I think, as opposed to disagreement. So let's see here.
Can I just interrupt for a sec? Can I just
sure.
Well, I have to make one point here. I've never heard anybody speak so well of Clippy.
Well, yeah, I know exactly. This is why I pull this stuff out. I got a whole bag of these examples.
I think there's a whole bunch of listeners that probably don't even know what we're talking about. But that little paper clip that used to say, "Are you writing a letter?"
Yeah.
Cool.
So Clippy.
So
you're right. So for the younger listeners, so when I was in high school, Microsoft tried to do a chatbot and it would pop up in Microsoft Word, and it would try to detect the task you were doing, and it was always wrong, and it was always annoying. It was people were constantly, and so it became the kind of the one of the go-to jokes of the tech world, and now it's so long ago that we forgot about it.
Yeah. I'm going to have a tangent on a tangent, and then I'll pull ourselves back. The tangent on a tangent is that one of the issues with Clippy years afterwards, they were talking to some of the product managers for it, and what they said was the original Clippy was supposed to be a lot less intrusive, and basically somebody higher up in the business said, "Oh, it's not popping up and getting enough attention, make it more annoying," and they did to make it more visible. But it was at that point annoying to the point that people hated it, in which case it kind of killed it. So there's a little bit of a product management lesson in that, but
it also didn't work. There's a fundamental there. It actually didn't work.
As the marketer on the call, listening to you saying, "Make it more annoying, make it bigger, make it pop up more." That sounds like life to me. Yeah, absolutely right.
Well, who can load a website without 7 pop-ups today?
Yeah, exactly.
So the general trajectory is good. I think one of the interesting things in the debate between the two of you on LinkedIn was the fact that, do we care? I mean, the question I was going to ask is Meta the right company for this? Which I think is actually the wrong question, and neither of us are like financial analysts. And it sounds like we don't actually care about the fate of Meta as a business or their shareholders. We care about the technology and where this is going to go. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the points you were making, Oz, was like, you don't really care, but it's not like whether it's right or wrong for Facebook. Is it right or wrong for the metaverse? So is all this investment the Meta are putting in the metaverse, is this good?
So I want to talk about good. Is it good? Yes. It's good. It's good that big companies blow squintillions of dollars breaking ground, making mistakes, putting in infrastructure, doing things that will make then all the young and plucky companies who come up with better ideas, that they will be able to take advantage of them and stand on their shoulders. So I think that is a net good for the world. So no matter how much whatever it does to Facebook's stock price, which has recovered nicely in the past few months. Just a little on the side, I do speak to someone who knows probably better than any of us about this kind of deep customer and business strategy analysis. And we sat down, and right when it dropped to $88 a share, he goes, I'm going in, because all Zuckerberg needs to do is make an announcement that he's going to focus on core business and efficiencies, and the stock's going to pop. Because Facebook's, it was compared to what the money they actually make, the business was very healthy. Anyway, again,
I hear that on other podcasts as well. I mean, I listen to the Prof G podcast, which is fundamentally about finance, and even though, I mean, I don't know if you listen to Prof G, he hates Zuckerberg, but the business fundamentals are pretty sound. Even they can afford to spend all this cash on the metaverse, and it may never come to anything, but the core thing is we're still spending a shitload on Facebook ads and stuff, so it still works. But Mark, what was your opinion on that, on their spend?
So let's see, I'll kind of parse it out in the same sense that Noz did as well. I think in general, I agree with this principle that there's going to be businesses that have deep pockets that are going to have the resources to experiment and push in different directions. I think the tricky thing is trying to lock that in and monetize that. And I think, it's kind of relative to what I was talking about at the start of the conversation. A lot of the internet really picked up because the standards were fairly open. It was fairly free. You didn't have to use somebody's web server. You didn't have to use somebody's monitor or computer to make it work. And even businesses that attempted to try that, like say Microsoft with ActiveX controls and quote unquote embracing and extending on that standard and Java standards and JavaScript standards and the
Adobe
Flash, and the market ultimately rejected those things. And so I think depending upon the nature of that investment coming from Meta, and if it's built upon more open things, then yes, we will kind of get that overall market ecosystem and some growth in the sort of cracks within the monoliths, and that'll be good. If businesses try to keep it very locked down and restrictive, I think it might just be a big, burning of money in a pit, and we won't see that sort of spread of ideas. Well, we will from the people changing companies, but you won't really from like a technological or standards point of view.
That's the big test, isn't it? It seems to me is that this thing needs to be open enough that people can broadly adopt it like the internet broadly adopted, but closed enough that these big companies can make their cash and be the AOL of their time or whatever, right? I don't know whether that's a particularly good analogy. I don't know.
I think it is a good analogy because ultimately they weren't able to sustain that model. So I think it still holds up.
Well, that's the question. Will they be AOLs or will they be Googles and Amazons and so on? That's, I think, and then coming back to that same discussion I had with somebody who's deep into the investor side, that was a question. And so although he was quite bullish about the Meta stock, it was not about the metaverse. It was still lots of question marks for him. And it came down to, is this going to go mainstream enough that it's going to be what marketers and businesses need to care about in the way that they need to care about the internet? And I want to come back to my point is that it's not we shouldn't be looking at this as a binary yes, no, metaverse kind of thing. The question is, what are the incremental steps towards this, and how do we define a strategy which makes sure that we're at the right point of the innovation wave? So I talk about an immersive technology spectrum. So we see today companies like the New York Times. If you look at New York Times Interactive, and there's another great link somebody sent me recently with examples. But basically, their data visualization team is awesome, and they're doing a lot of 3D in the browser. And what they've done is they've reimagined the scroll bar as a hallway. So you don't just read a story on a flat screen. There are times when as you move the scroll bar, you'll be doing a flyover of a physical space. Wow. So I've seen examples where they take you through the fuselage of an airplane, talk about COVID spread through the ventilation system, or very moving and historically important examples like the Tulsa Race Massacre in the United States, where you're doing this kind of guided walkthrough of the town, and that highlights different buildings and information pops up, and it's all in 3D, but it's all being done in the browser. And Google has also released statistics, I don't have them to hand, that product results, if you're the product results that show up when you do a search, if you show 3D, and Amazon as well, if you have 3D products that people can pinch and rotate and scroll and bring them around or explode them, that's those 3D assets, they sell better. So 3D on the 2D surface is something that you can be doing today and you'll benefit from today. Those assets and those pipelines will serve you regardless of how fast the metaverse goes mainstream. That's the question is, we need to go in that direction, and then be thinking, where are we, and what is the logical next step for our brand?
Yeah, and this is something I was going to ask you guys, because, and also you keep saying 3D, makes me think of 3D TV, which is a perfectly capable, perfectly possible technology. There was a big fad for 3D TV. One of my mates bought one, really expensive one, but where are they now? Nobody bothers with them anymore, and nobody wants to bother with the headset. And I wanted to ask you guys about that, because most people think of the metaverse as Zuckerberg's definition, well, I think I might be wrong, of wearing a VR headset, an expensive VR headset that creates nausea. It seems to be a point of friction, both in terms of cost and convenience. And it kind of reminds me of that. What do you guys think? I mean, Mark, do you think it is about is that what the metaverse is?
Well, maybe I'll sidestep that and I'll talk a little bit about the hardware issues.
Yeah.
And so personally, I'm a fan of VR. I have a really nice HP headset, a really nice video card. I love spending time in Microsoft Flight Simulator. During the pandemic, before the pandemic, I used to fly a lot, and that was like my zen. I would look out the window at mountains, and I missed that. Yeah. So I bought a VR setup specifically to get that. So I love VR. But that said, to your point, there's a ton of issues around it, and especially from an accessibility perspective, I can't fly around for more than a couple hours without feeling sick. Anybody wearing glasses, it's not particularly good for, and it requires an absolute gobsmacking amount of hardware to make it decent. And I think the biggest limitation is not necessarily the hardware and video cards, because Moore's law is starting to reach the limits of the laws of physics, but it still is kind of a thing. The biggest limitation for that is just the human body is wonky, and having 3D interfaces mated to our wonky biological hardware just is not particularly great. And so, even to go back to when we were talking about science fiction, in all of those cases, they would always have this concept of the neurological cutout, because even back then, the authors knew this is not going to work based upon the limitations that we have with our eyes. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest limitations, and that's why I still think mobile phones and AR is interesting. And there's a lot that Nas said that I agree with. I think there's amazing potential for 3D and AR, and I've even tested out furniture from Crate and Barrel in situ in my living room and said, yeah, I like that, and I bought it. I am an early adopter for a lot of this stuff, but I just don't see that VR vision, especially for working, being really particularly effective at solving human problems around collaboration. I see a lot more interesting things around, Miro and Figma, and, those are very 2D based tools, but they're solving a little bit more of the whiteboarding and collaboration challenge that I think is actually more of an issue for remote working than not seeing people in 3D. So
I absolutely agree with that. And I find, I'm a gamer. I find I don't need a headset to be completely immersed in something, right? You get completely immersed in movies, you get completely immersed in games, you can get completely immersed in a conversation like this where it's just on the screen. But like you say, Mark, there's some real world things we're missing, like whiteboarding and stuff like that. What do you think, Nos?
So that kind of teased me up perfectly. I just did I just did an interview on my podcast with Timmy Stoop Alcala, who is the principal content strategist at IKEA. Mm-hmm. And but they are building a metaverse strategy. And things like augmented reality are, so when I was talking about the kind of spectrum of immersive technologies or 3D technologies, there's on the glass 3D. Then there is augmented reality, which is via either a headset, which is the new Meta headset is much more focused on AR, although they didn't hit their target objectives for that. But the goal was to create something that could be much more of an AR headset, and that is also where Microsoft has been having huge success. Is their headsets are focused on remote collaboration and support. So outside of the kind of the meetings thing, I think as marketers, we can kind of be focused on desk work and, like the Miro. I love Miro and I totally agree. That's something that we all needed. But there's a ton of people who still work in the physical world. people who need to move wires and unscrew hubcaps and not have propeller blades hit them in the head. There are millions and millions of people who do physical work. So they're early case studies from Mercedes where they're having, very, very expensive engineers sitting in Germany who are basically telepresencing themselves to be standing on the shoulder of like a parrot of engineers in Bangladesh or in Dubai or in Latin America.
I've seen the same with surgeons. I saw a TV program the other day where they were talking about the same thing in surgery.
So I run a workshop on the metaverse, and my students I said, okay, we did the whole kind of introduction. And I said, okay, now let's talk about applications. And they just started blathering out like tons and tons and tons of applications. They're like from cooking, assembly or configuration instructions, retooling an assembly line, corporate onboarding and training, pandemic playtime for kids, remote surgery, product and fashion testing, interior home design, real estate tours, physical and motor skills rehabilitation. Wow. So there's and that's just a short summary. If we kind of think about this as a switch, am I going to go from the screen to the VR world? That's not a necessary dichotomy. Right. We access the internet from watches, from voice assistants, through chatbots, through small mobile devices, large mobile devices, interactive touch screens. The desktop hasn't gone away. Like I have a 27-inch screen in front of me. So we should see the metaverse not as an alternative to the internet, but another way to access content.
Right. We'll just view that content with different fidelity, presumably. The watch, the phone, the screen, the VR headset. We'll just get deeper into it. And I really like what you were talking about earlier on about some of the stuff that's happening in 3D on the web, where you can imagine that kind of experience could be that bridge experience, couldn't it? You can experience it both on your desktop machine, and if you had the headset on, you would experience it slightly differently. I think that's really interesting.
Sorry, thank you. Actually, I just want to say the reason I brought up IKEA is to describe like if we think about a journey, you can be Googling stuff on your phone. You can see a product. You can then turn on the AR augmented reality capability of your phone and try to place that product in your virtual living room, and then think, oh wait, well I might want a whole new bed set to go with this. Well, not in your living room, but dinette set, whatever, to go with this, and then start playing with different product selections, and then take that into the virtual space at home and use a headset to do a much more rich play with that. And then go possibly to IKEA, and then in their space, which they've defined for virtual reality, spend 30 minutes envisaging the whole thing, and with the help of a human being who's kind of guiding you through the product recommendations. So this is not for complete journeys any more than we want to complete entire journeys on our watch. It is a touch point in the omnichannel ecosystem, but we need to think about how it integrates. Right.
And you use the key word there, I think, integrates, when we talk about the metaverse, and going back to our conversation about this walled garden of AOL, using our example, or actually it being something that we interact with and we move between worlds. I mean, there are a lot of the talk at the moment about metaverses around Minecraft and Fortnite and some of the games, but it seems that the true breakthrough is going to be the interoperability between these silos, right? What do you think of that? Do you think we're moving in that direction? I'm sure that Meta are not going to support that, are they? Because they're going to want us to be in their walled garden. But are you seeing anything where that kind of work is happening? No, sorry. Oh, Mark, I don't mind.
Yeah, no, I guess I'll comment sort of at a higher level, and then maybe Naz, if you're seeing some of the specific examples. But I definitely think that it does need to be more of an open approach. And, all the examples that Naz was giving, those are all things that people can be doing today by kind of pushing and extending current technologies. This really isn't requiring like this massive sea change and a whole new platform coming from Facebook and, it can be much more incremental. And I agree, like as a marketer, or as a business that is starting to push more omnichannel, you should be thinking about those things, in that way, whereas like, what are my use cases, and then incrementally start adding that in, as opposed to waiting to see and say like, oh, this is the new VR thing and trying to push that. I was recently, Noz will know this company, but Ian, you may not. In Canada, there's a company called Canadian Tire. It's one of the big brands in Canada. People sort of joke Canada is like, two telco companies and a shopping chain in a trench coat, as far as businesses are concerned. So Canadian Tire kind of owns a big chunk of everything, and they're advertising on TV like, you can see, and configure a Christmas tree in VR. And like, really? That's your big use case, and you're spending, how many millions to advertise this regularly on TV and in YouTube channels, and in a lot of sense, I think that's very gimmicky. And so, there is definitely a split, and I would really agree with Noz's thinking, which is to say, okay, what is your actual use case that makes sense for the company? And then you can take current technologies and really push those things in that direction. There are AR toolkits coming from Apple that are, fairly open. There are, models for storing VR and working with content in that way and storing that content in CMSs and digital asset management systems that way. So, you can actually do that today without waiting for this thing that's coming from somebody else.
Yeah, and there's projects like Mozilla, isn't it? They're doing projects as well, similar to what Meta are talking about in the metaverse and stuff. I'm going to have to wrap this up in a few minutes, but Noz, what do you think of this interoperability thing?
Well, you asked a key question about standards. So I know that Google that the web browsers are starting to take seriously again a native 3D language for browsers that would be able to, that you could, the same way you can save as a web HTML file. I don't know how technical your listeners are, but there is a standard file type for web pages, that there would be a standard type for 3D content for the web, which would then be 3D content for 3D. You could be able to represent on multiple different, anything that could render it. So I think that's kind of an eventuality. We talk about Facebook as a walled garden, but is it? Is it really? Like, would Facebook be at all successful if it didn't link to products outside? If it didn't link to web pages outside? If you weren't talking about stuff outside of Facebook, would there be anything in Facebook that you could plan your birthday party and you could have a chat? But what does it do other than provide links and pointers and meta discussion about stuff that's outside Facebook? That's how they make their money. Bringing people in with compelling experiences and then pointing them back out. That's their model. So if they can't point you back out, then they're not going to make as much money. So although right now they are trying to own the space, they're buying up companies like mad. There's nobody to point them out to today. Like there's a vicious circle in innovation where you have this great idea, you're building a platform with until we get through this what do you call it, chicken and egg. The platform's not there, the users aren't there, therefore there's no market, there's no reason to make the content. When the content is not going to be, users are never going to come if there isn't compelling content. So we're going to go through that chicken and egg for a while. But I think standardization is kind of an inevitability, even with Meta's model.
Yeah, no, I love this point, and it nicely ties back to what we were talking about in terms of the balance that Facebook and Meta are going to need to find between being open enough that there's adoption and makes this thing work, and it's a world we all want to go to, and being closed enough that as a shareholder company that they can still leverage it for the monetary value of that. That's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I need to wrap it up, I'm afraid. Mark, when folks spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn at mdemony or my company at uniform.dev.
Splendid. And you, Noz, where are we going to find you?
So I'm also a big fan of LinkedIn. There's not a lot of Noz Urbinas kicking around, so you should probably be able to find me pretty easily. And then omnichannelx.digital to find out about the conference, where you're going to see several presentations on omnichannel and probably the metaverse and headless CMS and all the back-end stuff that you need to make it happen, omnichannel or the metaverse. And then urbinaconsulting.com. You can check out find out about my company to see what we do.
And your podcast. You mentioned you got a podcast.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
cool?
Of course. Well, the Omnichannel podcast is off of omnichannelx.digital. So there's resources there. You can check out the blog, the podcast, so sign up to the newsletter, all that good stuff.
Well, I've really enjoyed chatting to you two guys. Thank you very much for your time. And Mark, thank you for throwing down the gauntlet and making this thing happen. So thanks very much, guys. And have a great holiday. Enjoy the holidays. And I look forward to having you guys back. This is a great topic, and we can talk about this again in the new year. So thanks, guys.
Happy to oblige, and happy holidays as well.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Good time. Thanks.
Thank you, chaps. I will, of course, include all the links to Noz, Mark, and the Guardian article we refer to in the show notes. What do you reckon? Is this metaverse a thing for 2023? Let us know. And if, like Mark, you want to join or spark the conversation, we are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn. Right. It's time to wind down for the holidays in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail. And I wonder what Robert would like to be under his marketing Christmas tree this year. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello. What is going on? Hold on a moment. This is the noisiest Christmas market I have ever seen in my life. There's vendors shouting, and then there's Christmas songs going, and wow, isn't this just the most? I mean, truly, this is a Christmas market that would rival any. And I've been to some big Christmas markets. You've really outdone yourself, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Now, I have no idea where you're going to find Christmas market sounds on the internet, but that is up to you.
Yeah, well, let's hope that they're believable for the listener.
Yeah.
Whatever it is I come up with. Yes, I love Christmas market. And I know that you and Joe on your show were talking about Christmas markets.
I love Christmas. Christmas markets are one of my very favorite things. I wish we did them here. We do not do them in the U.S., and it is one of the many things that Europeans do so much better than we do. I'm sad that we don't have them here.
Yeah, I would toss in Munich as one of the ones that you must go and see in all the places. I know that we've talked. Actually, it was probably this time last year we were talking about a Christmas market in the Nordics. I think we went to one in Stockholm, didn't we? If I'm remembering our episode.
Stockholm was amazing.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, it was one of my very first, so perhaps that influenced me quite a bit. But it was one of the very first Christmas markets I ever went to, and it was. I mean, it was like a wonderland. It was really just amazing, and the food, and the music, and the people, and everybody's dressed up, and it's so special.
It's a bit like this bar on Christmas Eve. Absolutely.
It is. I mean, really. I mean, look around. Look what we've done here. It's
absolutely. So, what are we drinking this?
So we are drinking something very simple for this wonderful Christmas time. It could not be more simple, although I very much suspect you don't have it. And it is as simple as it gets, which is, and it will make my mother happy, my now passed away mother, of course, and all of the folks on that side of my family who come from Glasgow and the Scotland. That whole side of my family, of course, is Scottish. And so we are going to be drinking a Macallan 15-year double cask Scotch whiskey, which is just an absolute treasure. It is a single malt Scotch whiskey. And it is, and people, people make the mistake of assuming that the older, the better.
Yeah.
That is not true. It's just a different taste. It's not necessarily better or more valuable. The only reason it's more expensive is usually because more has evaporated away, and so there's less of it, of course. And so that's something a lot of people don't know about the Scotch and the whiskey making process. But anyway, this 15-year-old Macallan single malt is just absolutely special, and we will be drinking this. There will be no rocks. We will drink this neat on a cold Christmas Eve, and it will be wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
All right, well, let's hope you don't notice this then.
Yeah.
I have I've put some ice into a glass, and you've ruined my joke that I've been making for the last God knows how many weeks, which is I weirdly enough don't have a whiskey on my desktop bar. I will attempt to make this very complicated drink with what I do have, and what I do have is gin, Hendrick's gin, and Hendrick's gin is actually distilled in Scotland, so quite nearby where you are, where your whiskey came from, and where your family are from.
I didn't. Yes. I don't know.
I know because every week I say gin is the most English of whatever it is that you've chosen, and then I realise that Hendrick's is actually made in Scotland. So I'm offending anybody from Scotland basically by
Well, I think your Englishness basically offends anyone from Scotland.
Well, it's what we do, right? Is that we take credit for all sorts of things that Scotland have done, because then it's funny how we become British at that point.
Yeah.
It is the most British of tequilas. No, this is the most British of whiskies. I've got my gin, and you didn't put anything else into it. And while
literally
we weren't looking,
I wouldn't even put a rock in there. We're just going to drink this neat. And in many cases, I have had this a little bit warmed up, and it's nice. Lovely, but just a little bit warmed up, not hot, but a little bit warmed up is also nice.
Yes. Well, while you wasn't looking, I put in some cucumber tonic water into this. I'm going to give it a taste. That's not as warming as yours is, I don't suppose, but it is delicious. And I shall be trying to drink one of these every single week. And what are we calling that?
We're calling that a Macallan, is what we're calling that. A Macallan.
Fantastic. It's very nice.
Scotch, yeah.
Very nice. All right. And it's a special Christmas time. And I know last week we decided we were going to stay at home. Are we still at home, Robert? Or have we gone?
We are indeed. Nice? We're still at home. Yeah, let's just spend a little more time with our families because you can spend a lot more time with your families once you've had a few of these Macallans in your gullet. So.
Yeah, I'm much more jovial as well. I'm better to be around.
Indeed.
But anyway, but I did ask actually to do something a little bit different this week, as it will be Christmas tomorrow. And I was wondering, Robert, what is under your marketing Christmas tree? What are you hoping to open tomorrow and the rest of the year? What marketing gifts would you like?
There are a few. I'll mention a couple, and then maybe we can talk about them a little bit. But I think, broadly speaking, what I'm hoping for, what I have asked Santa for under the tree as it pertains to marketing, is honestly just a little more certainty around the broader economy.
Yeah,
I think I see so many marketing teams right now in a little bit of limbo, where they are either afraid to make commitments to longer term initiatives or are concerned about their longer term initiatives because there's so much uncertainty about, will there be a recession? Will there not be a recession? Will there be, an economic downturn, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And what I find that does is that it really foments the short-termism that so many businesses suffer from when it comes to marketing. And we talk about this a lot when we talk about content marketing, of course, which is a long-term investment into a process, into an owned media strategy, into something that's going to build an audience over the long haul. Yeah. It's the most unlike the daily arbitrage of ads and click-throughs and SEO keyword management and all the things that we do that are measured in days and weeks and months instead of quarters and years. And it's just hard to put together meaningful programs and marketing without some element of long-term thinking in there. And so what I'm hoping for very, 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 very much that Santa puts under the marketing tree is a little bit of clarity around, and obviously a positive clarity. I'm not wishing for anything negative. Positive clarity around the lack thereof of a pending recession, so that we can get some of our long-term projects kicked off here. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing, much more tactically around marketing, is there's been a real drive, and this is related, of course, there's been a real drive for efficiency over the last couple of years coming out of COVID and those kinds of things, doing more with less and doing more with less team members and the focus on talent. And what I'm also hoping for, put on a little bit under the tree, is a reflection on how to really think about differentiation and a return to using media and content to drive better expansion of our brand, of our revenue streams, of our products, of all the things that are in our business. Growth, a return to growth, if you will, growth marketing, as opposed to efficiency marketing, where we're just trying to drive more leads through a shortened funnel.
Yeah. These are very serious. I like these. What else?
I don't mess around when it comes to Christmas gifts. I don't.
Clearly. What else?
Plus, we've got McAllen working for us, so it gets real fast.
And you're not a greedy man, but I imagine there are more gifts under this tree. What else you got?
Well, the thing that I think is probably the most, superfluous of all of them, sort of that new shiny bicycle, is we've been doing a lot of looking at technology as it pertains to how does it help us better connect audiences. And right now, companies are really hot on this, right? They're thinking about their CRM systems, and they're thinking about their marketing automation systems, and they're thinking, how do we connect all these databases together in a meaningful way? And what I'm hopeful for a little bit is lighter technology, a shinier new technology that takes the idea of, and this is getting a little geeky, but not for your audience, for what's called a CDP, or a customer data platform, but the light version of that, right? A non-invasive, have to double down on the enterprise 7-figure, 6 months of implementation, blah, blah, blah. A version of that can really work in a light fashion. And I'm hopeful that somebody out there will invent such a thing, and it will be one of the new shiny toys that we might play with in the new year.
Yeah. When you say light, do you mean because it's quite a broad term, isn't it? CDP, and it's then used for a bunch of different use cases like personalization or whatever. Is it? What are you looking for it to do for you when you unwrap it?
It's a great question, because I've been asking for this tool for a long time, and it has not appeared under my tree yet. It is something that mixes the idea of what a CRM does with what a marketing automation system does. So if you look at traditional marketing automation systems, they traditionally, I'll use that word maybe in quotes, traditionally they're about email, right? It's all about creating drip campaigns through people who have signed up for something or who have been acquired in some way. There's a list, right? There's a database. And what marketing automation systems typically do, and I know there's the more advanced ones will do things like target your web content and customize landing pages and do all those things, which nobody uses them for, by the way. They're all email blast guns. And so the traditional method is to say, here's a singular database of marketing prospects that we want to drip campaigns out to. That's sort of the major function of a marketing automation system. But it's where we put our blog audiences. It's where we put the people who view our webinars. It's where we put the people who have, subscribed to our email newsletter. And then if you look at the other side, which is CRM, which is all about creating that relationship with that customer, it's all about how do I understand what they care about, what they do, what their actions were, so that I can more contextually deliver value to them over time, right? Whether that's from a customer service standpoint in the classic sense, or from a Salesforce automation perspective, how do I understand their actions so I know what stage of the journey they're in, so I know when and how hard to sell to them. And those two things are a Venn diagram, and there's overlap for sure. But what I'm after is something that enables me to connect the audience I have on my blog, the audience I have in my resource center, the audience I have on my webinar program, all these things which have traditionally either been separate and siloed databases or in some cases in one or the other, marketing automation or CRM, but put them into a thing where they start to get attributes, right? There is one database of my audiences that now inherit attributes called lead or qualified lead or engaged audience member or subscribed audience member, and allows me as a marketing team to de-silo the process of communicating these people so that if an audience member comes in and signs up for my blog, then they want to come in and register for a webinar, I know who they are. And so I don't have to ask for that information yet again. Yeah. And I can be more valuable to them in terms of targeting and delivering content to them that's better, but without having to go through the intricacies of trying to integrate CRM to marketing automation to the web content management system to do, it becomes, the plumbing of that becomes so very difficult. And so maybe I'm asking for too much, but that's the bike that I want under my tree is something that we can just layer in quickly, very much like we layer in these days content collaboration and calendaring and those kinds of things for our content marketing programs. Easy. Yeah. I mean, they're off-the-shelf solutions. I just want a simple off-the-shelf solution for audience management.
And we should cover this in a future episode. I'd love to talk to you about this for a bit longer. So what else is under your tree, my friend?
Other than that, some other than the certainty, which I feel like is probably the big gift that I would get next year, and other than a shiny new technology project, other than that, it's really just, goodness for everybody. I'm ready to be done with the whole COVID sort of commiseration and the sort of novelty of getting back together again in person. And I'm ready to take on the challenges of our business in a semi-normal environment. So I'm just hoping for really positive things for everybody out there.
Yeah, I was completely, I mean, I was unprepared for this conversation. You said, well, I'm going to ask you one of yours. And I was thinking, particularly the first point you made, which is just some joy, like how about some joy for marketers? I think there's a little bit of self-fulfilling truth if we all run around telling each other how terrible 23 is going to be. And I think that it will end up with what we asked for, right? And I think that we need to find what's positive about next year as a group and make the most of that and try and talk about that and be positive about what's coming.
I have this very strange, and maybe I'm just being too Pollyanna about the whole situation, but I really believe 23 could be amazing.
Yeah.
I really believe it could be sort of the first year out of stepping out of the goo that has been the pandemic and everything that has surrounded that. It feels to me like 23 could be a real cleansing year, and it feels also, by the way, from a geopolitical situation and from others that it could lean that way, right? I mean, it could lean that way. It could also, I've obviously leaned into the darkness as well, but I'm really feeling good about it.
Well, yes, exactly. And as a year, it hasn't got a lot of competition recently, has it? I mean, if it doesn't have a pandemic and a war, it's going to be in it.
Fair enough. Yes, it is a low bar. It is a low bar that we have to cross.
A controversial sporting event. No, I think it's going to be... Well, that's fantastic. So I hope that tomorrow you get to open all of these presents and they arrive. I think the technology might be a bit more of a challenge to put together, but that's what Boxing Day's for, isn't it? So I think that's great.
Yes, another wonderful European tradition that we do not celebrate here in the U.S. So indeed, which somebody actually asked me the origins of Boxing Day, and I said, I knew and then have forgotten it. Yes. So I went back and re-looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we don't really have any servants to actually go deliver gifts to, but that's all good.
All right, well, thank you very much. And if people are looking for content gifts, a tree where they might find some content gifts that you own, where might they find that?
Oh, don't look to me unless you want something like, that useful utility thing that you wouldn't ever want to give anybody because they're like, really? You're giving me a vacuum cleaner? We've been working on our own little hovel on the web, which of course is contentadvisory.net. And then I've been working a little bit on our little community, which I promised to work a lot harder on in 23, which is a little thing that we started experimenting on a number of platforms on, but the central hub of it is at experienceadvisors.io.
Splendid. All right. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs and they want to bring you gifts, where are they going to find you, Robert?
They'll find me doubling down on LinkedIn these days. Yeah, I'm spending a lot more time there, given what's going on in the world with the Bird app. But doubling down on LinkedIn and then spending a good amount of time on Mastodon, playing and sort of experimenting with it.
Splendid. And will you still return to the bar after Christmas?
In 2020, as we get to the precipice of 2023, which will of course be the following week's or next week's show, I should say, yes. Yes, absolutely. We'll talk about the new year. And of course, have another drink that you won't be able to make. So,
okay. Might as well finish the year as we started it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, mate,
we're nothing if not predictable, my friend. Yes.
I look forward to seeing you then, mate. I'll see you then.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you, Robert. Some fabulous gifts for marketing there. And of course, it's been a gift to have him on the show. So, that's a wrap on episode 146 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Noz and Mark for their insight and Robert for the excuse to have a cocktail. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasty jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. And finally, how about leaving us a gift for the season by letting us know what you think on the socials or with a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, while Jeff is enjoying his holiday, I'll be taking a look back at 2022. I have a really fun conversation with Beth Torrey, an expert in analyst relations, before retiring to the virtual bar with Robert to get his predictions for the coming year. Until then, happy holidays, and I hope you can join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.